Chapter 6:11 I'm just visiting a friend. 60 to 70 years. That much time has elapsed since my departure from Amora. It seemed like a lot of time, and in all honesty it was. At this time the average lifespan of a human was 200 to 300 years. 60 to 70 years were approximately 1/3 of a human's lifespan. Obviously that only applied to those who had mana within them. If they had no mana, then their lifespan would only equate to at most the early hundreds. There were ways to extend one's life if one had no mana. But those strategies were sometimes far too expensive because they called for the acquisition of incredibly expensive and potent medical materials and potions. In any case, even if it seemed like a lot of time, this wasn't a huge issue for an orc. Compared to humans, they lived much longer lives. For them, 70 years wasn't anything noteworthy. Of course, that wasn't what I was worried about. The problem was the situation surrounding him. I don't believe Silig's strength has increased much because Amora doesn't have a high aura density and there is still a conflict going on. He is most likely at least on the same level as me. Back then, the only reason Silig was able to break through to S- rank was because of the medical ingredients I had given him. That was in the past, however. With the state Amora was in, I feared that his strength might have stagnated. Resources were that scarce. I shouldn't have held this off for as long as I did. This made me realize just how negligent I had been in the past. The situation was probably dire for the orcs at this moment. Dire enough to not make me want to help them. It sounded really troublesome, and if not for the fact that Angelica's life was on the line at Silig died, I would have already discarded the idea of saving him. How annoying. I murmured to myself as my vision became slightly foggy. My feet soon came to a halt. Before I knew it, I was in front of my house door. Feeling something trickle down my nose, I quickly wiped it away with my hand. I didn't need to look to understand it was blood. Shit, not again. I was forced to lean my hand against the side of the door as a wave of dizziness hit me. The world around me started to spin and I started to choke on the air. Quack. My body shook to the sides as my eyesight zoomed and unzoomed. My hold on the door handle was all that was preventing me from falling. The experience I was having reminded me of being stranded aboard a tiny wooden boat in the middle of the ocean with waves twice the size of me. My stomach churned. My breathing was labored, and it took a total of 5 minutes for the symptoms to subside. Even then, I didn't feel so good. Was it because I was overworking my body to the extreme or because the other me was slowly taking over? I wasn't sure, but it's getting worse. The frequency and duration of them were increasing, if there was anything I observed. Thought occurred to me. I hope Melissa is done checking over my conditions. When the symptoms first appeared, I visited numerous medical professionals. None of them, though, appeared knowledgeable enough to understand what was happening inside of me right then. This was why things had gotten as bad as they did. Melissa was my sole ray of hope at the time. I had thrown my pride to the wind and sought her for assistance. Surprisingly, she came, took a sample of my blood, and didn't seem to be against the concept of helping me as I thought she would have been. All I had to do was wait for the results to come back. That being said, it was taking longer than I had anticipated. Not that I was one to complain. The only thing that was a bit troublesome was the fact that she wasn't a doctor, but a man could only hope. I rang the doorbell to my house once I managed to calm myself down. The sound of rushed footsteps echoed shortly after, and coming to greet me at the door was my mother. Welcome back, Rin. Yeah. Receiving one of her usual hugs, I went into the room and took off my shoes. After that, I headed into the living room where I saw everyone already gathered. The moment I entered the room, they all looked at me with strange faces. What? The way they were looking at me. It was kind of weird. Right. It took me an instant to realize why they were looking at me like that. Bitterly smiling, I sat down on the sofa. I didn't do it because I wanted to. Circumstances made me have to act that way. I didn't explain more than that since they wouldn't understand anyways. Fortunately, none of the people present seemed keen in asking for more as they greeted me and went back to their own thing. Want one? Nola offered me a chip once I sat down on the sofa. I gladly took her up on the offer and ate the chip. Meanwhile, I rubbed Nola in the head with my head. Don't mind if I do. Stop it. To my shock, Nola stood up and glared at me. No. Her reaction left me dumbfounded. Why was she reacting like that? Look at what you've done. Now her hair is all messed up. Amanda walked toward Nola and began to style her hair, which further confused me. It took a total of 2 minutes for her to fix Nola's hair. All done. Amanda took out a small mirror and showed it to Nola. She immediately smiled when she saw her own reflection. Happy. Happy. Nola happily nodded her head before sitting back down on the sofa. This time she chose to sit on the other side, right next to Amanda and further away from me. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself. Amanda shook her head and sat down next to me. How was I supposed to know? Here, look. Unexpectedly, Amanda leaned down and handed me her phone. She leaned so close to me that it wasn't long before I felt her head on my shoulder. My eyes opened up a bit as I looked around me and whispered near her ear. Hey, you're leaning a bit too close. So, everyone is looking. Shifting her head up to look at me, she grinned. And, ugh. Speechless, I opened and closed my mouth repeatedly. Eventually, I let out a long groan. After his death, a lot of things changed throughout the course of the last 2 years. You'd think Amanda would have kept her distance from me throughout that period. I would have completely understood if she buried her affections for me after what she saw, but, applying more pressure on my arm, she murmured, "Let them watch if they are interested." I could only sigh in exasperation. Right, in the end, this is my decision. Whether it was because I needed to come to terms with Small Snake's death or because she stuck with me after finding out the truth, I eventually made the decision to accept her feelings. Not that our relationship changed that much. Although that was a rather significant jump for me, I eventually discovered that aside from Amanda acting more pampered than usual, our relationship hadn't actually changed all that much. It was mainly because we were both busy with our own things, her with the guild and me with the curse. But that was all right. We were moving at our own pace and that was all that mattered. There was no need to rush things. Here, have a look. Amanda nudged her phone in my direction. Oh, right. Taking the phone from her hand, I looked at the screen. Rank 18 at the age of 24. Monster or a spy from the monolith. Rin Dover makes a shocking return. From the conference too. I handed the phone back to Amanda. Why are you showing me this? Take a look at the pictures. She pointed out while leaning her body closer. Oh. It was only after she pointed it out to me that I realized that all the photos used in the articles were that of me with a fake smile on. I let out a tired sigh. Out of all the pictures they could have used. You can't really blame them. The screen turned black after a certain period of time. Amanda's mom interjected in the middle. She had a rather amused smile on her face. I feigned ignorance to it. Screen turned black. Yeah. At one point the screen turned black. I think it was because of something you did. Right. And here I thought they had all seen what I did. I guess I had used a bit too much strength. Well, it doesn't matter. I wanted to get the message across to the people in the hall, not them anyways. I think that was for the best. Why is that? Natasha curiously asked. Amanda answered her before I could answer. The fewer people get to see his real strength, the better. Then again, lifting her head slightly to meet my eyes, her lips curled. You didn't exactly show all your strength, did you? She knows me too well. I mysteriously smiled. Maybe. Who knows? Amanda lifted her head from my shoulder. After that, she scooched over to where Nola was. She was currently busy playing on Amanda's phone. Well, since you won't say anything, I'll just play with Nola. Hey, wait. Click. After locking the door behind him, Kevin turned on his apartment's lights. When the light flared and brightened the space, he experienced an odd feeling of loneliness after giving his apartment a careful inspection. His apartment was rather big, enough for a whole family to comfortably live in. It had everything from 2 bathrooms for bedrooms, a living room and a gym, yet at the same time felt extremely empty. Taking a bottle of water from the fridge, Kevin sat down on one of his sofas in the living room and turned on the TV. To be honest, I'm quite frankly shocked by his achievements. For him to rank 18 at the age of 24, could this be a sign? Carol, I'm quite frankly still not really convinced by. Looks like you've become the talk of the town, Ren. Kevin lightly laughed as he looked at the news. He found the picture used on the screen especially funny. It was so glaringly obvious that his smile was fake. Ding! It was at this moment that his phone rang. Kevin took out his phone and looked to see who the sender was. Hey, why aren't you answering me anymore? It was from Emma. His smile slowly faded. Clenching onto his phone, his hand started to shake. Biting his lips, he turned off the phone and leaned his head back against the sofa. Blankly staring at the ceiling of the room for what felt like forever, he smiled in self-deprecation. Kevin lowered his head and clenched his teeth. Extending his hand started to glow in white color. His eyes flashed with loneliness when he looked at the white glow. In the end, this is the only way. Even if you end up hating me for forcing you into this situation, for making you remember all of your regressions, you're the only one that can do something about it. Kevin slowly clenched his hand. After all, a puppet can't fight against their master. Chapter 6:12 I'm just visiting a friend. A new morning arrived. As soon as I woke up, I washed up and had breakfast with my family. After that, I got changed and left the apartment. Not going to lie, the last part took me a little longer than expected due to some unforeseen circumstances. Nevertheless, I was still on time. Are you ready? I was greeted by Amanda when I arrived at the front of the flat. She looked quite vivacious with her long white skirt and a black turtleneck that hid her neck. Upon seeing her, I apologized immediately. Sorry, Nola was giving me a hard time. What happened this time? She had a nightmare and she didn't want to let go of me. Amanda covered her mouth and laughed. That's adorable. Not when you're in a hurry. New novel chapters are published on ewebnovel.com. It's fine, let's go. I've got the driver waiting downstairs. Thanks. Thanking Amanda, my mood shifted. Not in a good way, as I was reminded of my purpose. It's been a while since I last paid a visit to Small Snake's grave. About a year or so. I just couldn't bear to go. It reminded me of my failure. My failure in saving someone that was dear to me. But I also knew that this couldn't go on anymore. As I was getting ready to leave for Amora, I thought I should pay him a visit. It was about time I moved on. It's all right. I felt Amanda squeeze my hand as she looked up at me. Meeting her gaze, I felt my heart calm down a little as a smile spread across my face. Then, squeezing her hand back, I leaned my body forward and gave her a peck on the cheek. Thanks. I let go of her hand and moved away toward the elevators, pretending ignorance to her bewildered expression. It was about time I got her back because of how cheeky she had been acting lately. I was satisfied with just seeing her reaction. And it was exactly because of this feeling that I was experiencing that my face turned somber. I can't lose this. This little joy in my life. It was probably the only thing that was stopping me from losing it. So, I had to do everything to not lose it. Amanda stared at Ren's parting back with her hand pressed against the side of her cheek. It's hot. She inwardly mumbled to herself while she felt the heat rise on both sides of her cheeks. Ren's unexpected actions shook her more than she expected. Most likely because this was the first time he had ever taken the initiative. Typically, it would always be her who initiated. She didn't blame him, however. She was completely aware of his feelings and never attempted to force her emotions on him. Even though their progress was extremely slow, it was nonetheless still progress, and Amanda could see from Ren's behavior that he was gradually coming around to accepting her. His actions were testimony to this, and her heart warmed up a little. But, covering her mouth with her arm while her other hand touched her cheek, she stuttered. But, it was just a peck. But. All sorts of tabs flashed across Ryan's screen as his fingers danced on the keyboard. One had to wonder if Ryan was actually able to see what the tabs exhibited given how quickly they arrived and disappeared. Unexpectedly, it seemed like he could see them clearly. Darting his eyes over the 5 monitors in front of him, Ryan's hand paused. Then, with a furrow of his brows, he mumbled under his breath. There seems to be an external generator that is powering up the system. If I disable the system, the generator will activate and the enemies will be alerted of our presence. How troublesome. Shifting his head to stare at one of the monitors, Ryan pressed his ear. It appears that I won't be able to assist you any longer, guys. They have a backup generator for their system. You must act quickly since the only thing I can assist you with is preventing any communication from leaking out. No problem. A crisp voice echoed inside of his ear. Belonged to Ava. Hein and I can handle this without a problem. I'll get back at you in 10 minutes. We should be able to finish the mission by then. Got it. The communication shut off after that. Shifting his head back toward the main screen, Ryan took a pen from the side of his desk and signed something off. With this, we should be able to meet our monthly quota. Being mercenaries, they unavoidably had to perform tasks from time to time. They were required by law to meet certain monthly targets in order to maintain their rank. Since they were of the lowest rank in the past, it wasn't an issue before, but when their mercenary organization rose in status, they were required to accomplish missions each month to maintain the rank. The perks that came with being a highly ranked mercenary group weren't something to be trifled with. It wasn't just the fame that came with it, but they were also granted priority to certain dungeons. That alone was a great incentive to rank up. Regarding the missions, everyone in the group took turns, and at the moment, it was Hein and Ava's turn to complete the missions. With this mission complete, we can relax for another month. Ryan dropped the pen on the table and reclined on his chair. He then blankly stared at the ceiling. This job sure is tough. Inheriting his connections and role, Ryan tried his best to make up for his absence, but even after 2 years had passed, he was not as efficient as Small Snake was. It was only after he took over his role that he understood just how good Small Snake was at his job. Let's not think about it. Ryan felt his chest tighten whenever he thought of Small Snake. Even after all this time had passed, he couldn't move on from what happened. His death agonized him every day. Maybe because he was still a teenager, or maybe because Small Snake meant so much to him, but every day he would force himself to learn and improve his methods. It was the only thing that kept his mind busy. Never again did he want such a situation to happen again. Ding. Right then Ryan received a message. It was from Rin. Tell the others to drop whatever they are doing. We are going to another planet in 2 days' time. I want everyone to be present. Ryan blinked a couple of times as heavy silence fell upon the room. Taking a deep breath, he tried to calm down, but when he saw the words, another planet, he couldn't stop himself from trembling. It brought rise to memories he wanted to forget with all of his might. Unknowingly, his foot started to shake in a nervous manner. Calm down, Ryan. It took several seconds for him to quell his rough breathing, and even then he could feel his heart beating uncontrollably inside of his chest. Huff, huff. Clenching his teeth, he brought his fingers to the phone. Okay. He sent a simple message. One that only contained a single word. And one that took all of his energy to send. Ryan stood up from his seat once he sent the message. He carefully raised his head to look at his mirror while resting both of his hands on the desk to support his body. He said, staring at his swollen eyes. This can't go on, I need to move on. We're here. I exited the black car and stretched my body. A familiar chapel appeared in the distance. I closed my eyes while breathing in the air. Here I am. It had been a while since I had been here. Honestly, everything felt so familiar yet so unfamiliar at the same time. I couldn't quite put how I was feeling into words, but it wasn't a pleasant feeling. It almost felt like it was eating away at the little sanity that I had left. The weather's nice today. Amanda's voice reached my ears. From the tone of her voice, I could tell she understood how I was feeling and was trying to shift my thoughts to something else. You're right. Taking a deep breath, I slowly opened my eyes. The weather is indeed nice. Cloudless and azure blue. It was the best weather one could ask for. Then, smiling slightly, I proceeded to head toward the cemetery. Contrary to what movies portray, the cemetery was actually quite beautiful. In addition to its short green hills, the cemetery was surrounded by beautiful trees and flowers that livened up the place. The fresh smell of cleanly cut grass permeated the air, as the sun brightly lit the surroundings. A peaceful yet sad vibe enshrouded the area as I quietly walked around the cemetery with one direction in mind. Yes, the setting was lovely, but that didn't lessen the sense of loss I experienced as I passed the tombs and saw the writings on the tombstones. Treasured husband, dad and granddad. Treasured wife. Treasured daughter. It wasn't long before my heart started to feel heavy. The sense of loss I felt only intensified the more I looked around. I still nonetheless continued to move forward. Soon enough, my feet came to a stop. My brows furrowed. Isn't that Small Snake's grave? Or am I remembering wrongly? I turned back to look at Amanda and pointed to a particular tomb. That is his grave. She stopped right next to me and wrinkled her brows as well. I'm certain it is. Is that so? When I heard her affirm it, I looked back toward the tomb. My gaze then fixed on a particular person in the distance, who from the looks of him appeared to be a guy. He silently knelt on the ground without moving, his long black coat reaching all the way to his knees, and his long black hair covering his face. Although I didn't know who he was, I could tell from the texture of his coat that he was from an affluent background. Also, the way he continued to kneel on the ground without caring if the coat became soiled, made me think that perhaps he was someone who was quite close to Small Snake in the past. Who is he? The only thing that confused me was the fact that I had no idea who he was. Realistically speaking, anyone apart from a select few knew that Small Snake was dead. The fact that there was someone else that I didn't know made me feel somewhat confused. Ads by PubFuture. Then just as I was about to move, we briefly locked eyes as he gently raised his head and turned to face him. My foot came to a sudden halt and my heart slowly started to sink. The man. Those devilishly handsome features that only Kevin and Jean could rival. That tremendous pressure that made the hair at the back of my neck stand. It's him. I thought to myself as I swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Malik Al-Shaytan. Chapter 613. I'm just visiting a friend. 3. Come. When Malik's eyes stopped on me and our eyes met, I felt completely at ease. Pressure. It was terrifying. More than I could have bargained for. Enough to make me feel suffocated with just a single breath. SS-rank. Although it was unclear to those watching, I, who was close to achieving SS-rank, could discern from a quick glance what level he had attained. The way the mana around him bent to his will. The way the world seemed so focused on him. And the pressure that closely resembled a couple of figures I had met in the past. Without a single doubt, he had broken through to SSS-rank. Before I knew it, he was a couple of steps away from me. You must be Rindover. Or should I say, 876? His voice echoed out. It sounded crisp and pleasant to the ear, yet at the same time felt extremely chilly. Nevertheless, I didn't get shaken up by his voice or pressure. At this moment, it seemed as though the emotion known as fear had completely dissipated from my body. My head tilted slightly as I asked in a rather monotonous tone. At this point, I was starting to doubt whether the one speaking was me or the other me. What are you doing here? Isn't it obvious? As he said, Malik Al-Shaytan, or lesser known as Hemlock, took a step to the side and gestured in the direction of Small Snake's grave. I'm here to pay a visit to my friend. His remarks would have normally have made me angry, but as I've said before, the emotion known as anger vanished from my body. His reply aroused no emotion from within me. At this point, I realized that something was wrong, yet at the same time had no time to understand what was going on. Friend, last time I heard you were the one responsible for killing his own mother? I'm sure no friend would actually do that. So he's still hung up on that. Hemlock quietly whispered to himself. The whisper was low, but it was audible enough for me to hear. He then repeatedly pointed toward his chest. You see, it was only because I was his friend that I did what I did. I did it to make sure he understood just how serious the situation is. In the end, I did everything for his benefit. I wished to show him the reality of the world. And the death of his mother was the only way that I could open up his eyes. I wanted him to understand just how feeble human life is. Without realizing it, my brows knit as I noticed signs of agony on his face. Why is he making such a face? I was starting to grow curious. What exactly was he trying to say? And why did it seem like he genuinely felt that his actions were correct? What reality are you speaking of? Curiosity got the better of me in the end. Hemlock lowered his head and met my sight. He let out a tired sigh. The reality that joining the demons is the only way for humanity to avoid extinction. We won't be able to protect ourselves in any other manner. What sort of nonsense is this? I wanted to blurt out loud these words, but as soon as my mouth opened, I realized that I couldn't. My mind grew numb when this realization dawned on me. Hemlock, on the other hand, seemed to have noticed my reaction, and a thin smile formed on his face. It appears that you are aware of the seriousness of our situation. Your inability to refute my arguments suggests that you are aware that they are not mere heresy from a psychopath, as the others appear to make it out to be. My hands started to clench. But it wasn't out of anger, but rather annoyance. His words. I had no means to correct them. After observing the various regressions that my body underwent, I realized that the Demon King was an entity that was simply too strong to be beaten. One might think that after multiple regressions defeating the Demon King would be possible, but it didn't seem to be the case, as both Kevin and I failed. Even after hundreds of different regressions occurred, it always ended with the timeline resetting. Had it been anyone else but me, they would have perceived Hemlock as an absolute psychopath, but for someone like me who understood the truth, his words. they didn't sound that wrong. Rather, they sounded rather convincing. And that was worrying. There was a sudden look of understanding on Hemlock's face. You appear to have met His Majesty based on the expression on your face. You can't really grasp how hopeless the situation is until you actually meet him. It was from my short meeting with him that I understood just how dire our situation was. It was Hemlock's words that snapped me out of my thoughts. He was still rambling about the Demon King and how powerful he was. He didn't need to tell me to know this much. I already knew and experienced the helplessness that came with meeting him. Hence why I shifted the topic away to something else. How did you know that Small Snake was dead? Small Snake? Hemlock blinked his eyes a couple of times, seemingly unable to understand who Small Snake was. It was only after I pointed at his tomb that he understood who I was talking to. Oh, you mean Brian? Right. Brian was indeed his name. Hemlock slowly nodded his head. Turning around to look at Small Snake's tomb, he sighed. Actually, I didn't know until last year. I was too busy trying to break through to notice that anything happened to him. Brushing his hair to the side, he fixed his eyes on me. But do you seriously think that Brian could actually hide away from me? Especially from someone like you whom we have been keeping a close eye on after it was revealed to us that you were 876. I stared back at him without saying anything. Indeed, for someone as powerful as the monolith, it wouldn't be strange for them to know my movements. Although I took a series of precautions to ensure that they didn't know all of my movements, it was inevitable for them to hold some information about me, such as who worked for me and stuff. I put a little lump of mana into his body just before we parted ways. There was no grand purpose behind it. It was so that I could find him as long as I was nearby. Just by feeling the mana, I would be able to get a general idea of where he was. It was also because of this that I knew that he was working in the black market. Surprisingly, the answer I received was far off from what I assumed was the case. I never did anything to him over the past couple of years because I hoped that he would slowly start to understand me. I was planning on meeting him up again soon, but as I was too busy with several problems that occurred due to a certain someone, a slight pause ensued after he said those last words. From the way he was looking at me, I knew about what he was talking about. He was definitely referring to the 876 incident. Who would have imagined the incident would have, in its own way, saved Small Snake? He unexpectedly vanished from the human realm as soon as I was preparing to approach him again after solving all the issues that you caused. But no matter how hard I looked for him, I was unable to locate him. How astonished was I, do you know? I briefly believed that he had passed away before realizing that I was still connected to the mana I had left in his body. From there I realized that he was outside of the human domain and waited for him to come back. Raising his hand to cover his face, Hemlock suddenly laughed. And that's where more problems came up. I got totally played by Octavius when he sent me a fake corpse of what was supposed to be you. He inched a little forward. The pressure that came out of his body became extremely overbearing, sealing all my movements. His low, deep and sinister voice reached for my ears. I'm not one to get angry easily, but you've managed to anger me more times than I could have ever imagined. First with all the troubles you caused at our headquarters, then when you sent us the fake corpse in your place. And lastly, he slowly turned his head to face Small Snake's grave. And lastly, your inability to protect Brian. The ground beneath cracked, forming a 1-inch deep circular crater. I couldn't move my body while this was happening. It wasn't like back when Jezebeth sealed all parts of my body, but it felt as though over 50 trucks were weighing down on me. It felt agonizing. Nonetheless, I mustered every bit of strength inside of my body and moved my finger. It was just a simple movement. A simple tap in the air with my index finger. But it was that seemingly gentle tap that brought rise to an incredible scene. An echoing hollow, clicking sound resembling two glasses tapping against each other echoed out, bringing forth 4 bright yellow rings that stretched outward. After that, there were rifts in the atmosphere where vivid yellow tangible sword energies slowly emerged. In the space of a few seconds, Hemlock was consumed by over 30 sword energies, all aiming at him with their pointed tips. Rumble. Rumble. The air around us started to shake and so did the surroundings. Leaves fell from the trees and the ground beneath us cracked even more. Not bad, not bad. Hemlock was the first of the two of us to give up just as the situation was about to get out of hand. The tightness that had been encircling me dissipated as soon as he raised both of his hands in the air in a sign of retreat. The sword energies in the air disappeared at the same time the pressure disappeared. Fixing his clothes and coat, Hemlock calmly looked around him. It would have been nice for us to continue our little bout, but it would be inappropriate for us to do it here. I may be the leader of the monolith, but I'm not heartless. He laughed to himself before he took a step forward and paused beside me. He then pressed his hand against my shoulder. Of course, the fact that we're still in a truce means that I can't touch you just yet, but... A smile slowly formed on his face and his eyes paused on Amanda, who was standing behind me. You should keep a good watch on those that are close to you. Let me remind you, the monolith has eyes everywhere. He gave my shoulder a light pat before walking away from the scene, leaving Amanda and I standing by ourselves in the cemetery, which was now in a mess. Ads by PubFuture. The anger that I previously felt was gone slowly started to emerge from deep within my body, but I was able to suppress it. I then slowly closed my eyes and clenched my fists. I need to break through to SS-rank. Even though our exchange was brief, there was still a clear difference between Malik Al-Shayatin's skills and mine. I wouldn't be able to fight him unless I advanced to SS-rank, and even then the likelihood of me winning was slim. I couldn't waste any more time. Rin. I felt a sudden tap on my shoulder and I snapped out of it. I didn't need to turn to know it was Amanda. Taking a deep breath, I turned around. Are you okay? She asked in a rather worried tone. Staring deeply into her eyes, I shook my head and honestly answered her. No, I'm not. Chapter 614, Returning to Elmora. The scenery outside of the window kept shifting as the car continued to move through the streets of Ashton City. There was an unusual silence inside the car as it passed each street. Are you okay? The silence was only broken by Amanda's voice, which contained hints of worry. If you're worried about my safety, you shouldn't be. I'm about to reach S-rank soon. I can hold my ow. That's not it. I cut her off before she could continue speaking. I then turned my attention in her direction. Your safety isn't what is bothering me. I already know just how strong you are. There's no need for me to protect you. Amanda was one of the last people that needed my protection. With a big guild backing her up and her father, who was now SS-rank, helping her, she was safer than anyone else I knew. Not only that, but her strength wasn't anything to scoff at. Even I would have trouble fighting against her if she started attacking me from a long distance. She was the worst opponent for me. Then what are you worried about? My strength. I truthfully replied. Lowering my head to gaze at my hands, I quietly whispered. I need more strength. I was strong yet so weak at the same time. If only I could become stronger faster. Sadly, time wasn't on my side. With only 2 years left, I didn't see much hope in the dark tunnel that I was walking in. Nonetheless, I still continued to walk. I had no choice but to. Amanda didn't say anything after overhearing my words. Her gaze was on me, but she didn't say anything. It seemed as though she understood my sentiments. The last thing I heard from her throughout the ride back home was her soft whisper. Me too. Union Tower, executive floor. Octavius overlooked the entirety of Ashton City from the comfort of his own office. Glass windows that stretched from one end of the room to the other allowed him to see everything. From the streets below, the skyscrapers in the distance. He stared at the city for what seemed like hours until he raised his head to stare at the large crack that was in the sky. What am I missing? A low, monotonous voice echoed out. Several years had passed since the crack in the sky appeared. During that time, Octavius watched as more and more people broke through to the next rank. From Monica reaching the SS-rank at the age of 32, and several other known figures also breaking through their previous talent limits, Octavius knew that this was the best time to break through. Humanity was in a state of prosperity. Only one issue remained. In spite of all the time that had elapsed, he was still only at the SS+ rank. Octavius was a patient man, and in a normal situation he wouldn't have given a damn about how long it took for him to advance to the next rank. However, the situation was different now. I can't feel it. The sensation one would feel when they were close to reaching the next level. Octavius couldn't feel it. This only meant one thing. He was still far from reaching the next rank. What did I give up my emotions for? Octavius's languid eyes rippled as he stared at the azure blue sky. Traces of loneliness flashed across his turbid eyes. Taking a deep breath, he turned around to face his desk. It was then that his eyes paused on a certain frame. On the frame was a little girl with brown hair and green eyes. Octavius lowered the frame with his hand to reveal several post-it notes in his handwriting. One he remembered writing a long time ago. Make sure to smile in front of children. Even if you lose your emotions, you should try your best to not let your own daughter down. Try patting her on the head when she cries. It should appease her if even for a little bit. Give her milk when she cries. I saw that candy makes children happy. Try giving them to her when she's crying. Make sure to show her some affection even if you can't feel anything for her. It's the least you can do for giving up on your emotions in exchange for more power. He raised the frame back up to hide the post-it notes. Even though he couldn't understand them, he felt like they were important. He just didn't know why. Soul. He mumbled to himself, taking out a large brown leather book from one of his drawers. Placing it on his desk, he started to flip through it. He had an inkling that the reason why he couldn't break through had something to do with his soul. The next day. Are you guys ready? We were currently standing in front of a large expanse of grass. Beside me was Kevin, who had his hand extended outwardly. The mana around him danced and fluctuated in a weird manner. He was about to open the portal that led to Amora. Since I have things to take care of at the Union, I won't be able to accompany you guys, but that shouldn't be a problem. When you people are finished, I'll just teleport to you guys and set up a portal. That will do. I thankfully nodded my head in Kevin's direction. The meeting time was supposed to be in 7 human days, which was about 70 days in Amora. By then Kevin would teleport to us and he would set up a portal. For obvious circumstances, Kevin couldn't come with us. Him being too busy was merely an excuse. The real reason he couldn't come was because his presence would definitely arouse Jezebeth's interest and in turn, raise the possibility of him appearing in Amora, which wasn't something I was keen on having. Are you ready? Kevin called out. Turning my head to look at the others behind me, I nodded my head. Judging from their looks, they looked ready. Yes, we're ready. Okay. Kevin's physique started to radiate a reddish glow. The color grew quickly this time, unlike the previous times he attempted to open the portals, before gently creating a net to enclose a white ball that formed in the middle of his palm. I've learned my lesson from last time. Kevin started to speak. In order to avoid leaving any traces of me opening up the portal, I have found a way to use my mana alone instead of. He paused mid-sentence and looked at the others. After that, his eyes rested on me and he no longer spoke any further. Nonetheless, I clearly understood what he was trying to say. He was most likely trying to refer to the Akashic Laws. A power only he and the Demon King held. Get ready. Extending his other hand, the free one, Kevin took out a large core from out of thin air. He then crushed it with his hand. Crack. Like glass, the core shattered into millions of pieces and a glass-shattering sound echoed. Following that, a surge of magic erupted from the center and traveled toward the white sphere that was encircled by Kevin's crimson color, like furiously dancing snakes. A wormhole began to form, spiraling around the white core. In the process, a gust of air was released and my hair and clothes fluttered wildly. I ignored it and looked at the others. Everyone was here. Ava, Hein, Leopold, Liam, Han Yufei, Ryan and Angelica. Yes, Angelica. To my surprise, Angelica chose to remain with us despite the contract expiring a year ago. In all honesty, I never expected her to remain with me after everything that happened, but at the same time I sort of understood her. After all, this was the only place she had left. Her relationship with her clan must have suffered greatly as a result of what occurred a few years ago in the dungeon. She would have without a doubt get into trouble if she had gone back. After all, they did suffer tremendous losses back then. Thus, it was within her best interest to make another contract with me. Compared to the previous contract we signed, it wasn't any different. Perhaps there were fewer restrictions on her, but that was about it. The time for the contract was set for 2 years for obvious reasons, and she could not betray or think of betraying anyone in the group in the time period set. The same went for me. Not that I thought she would actually betray us, but who knew, there was always a chance for everything. I at least knew this much. Are you guys ready? I asked while my eyes swept past everyone present. All of them were currently wearing grave expressions on their faces and were paying close attention to the portal. Without them knowing, their faces had already begun to pale when they gazed at the gateway, even though they tried their best not to show it. Evidently, they were reminded of what happened 2 years back. I couldn't blame them. I too felt a mix of emotions when I stared at the portal. but I was able to quickly squash emotions down once I saw that the portal was about to form. I'll go first. I decided to step in first to make sure that nothing was wrong with the portal. I looked at the others once more before turning to Kevin, who gave me a short nod. I reciprocated his slow head nod by doing the same. After that, without looking back, I entered the portal right after. Chapter 6:15 Returning to Lamora. When I emerged through the portal, I inhaled deeply. The teleportation had somewhat upset my stomach as it had in the past, but I was able to bear it. It was fortunate for me to know that the effects weren't as bad as the previous times. Was it because of my strength increase? I wasn't sure and I didn't care. At the moment, my mind was preoccupied with other things as I extended my hand. This sense of heaviness, yeah, it truly feels like I'm back in Amora. It only took me a single minute for me to know I was back in Amora. The distinct gravity that came from this place was quite familiar to me. It wasn't just that. The suns illuminating the sky wasn't just one sun, but another one, making it clear that I wasn't on Earth. Apart from that, the land looked exactly like Earth. Well, that was how it was supposed to be, but why is the sky gray? It took me a moment to realize this, but the sky was of an ashen gray color. Compared to the last time I had been here, the azure clear sky had completely changed. Because there were no clouds in the sky, it was necessary to point out that the sky's color had not changed because a storm was brewing, but rather, it was the pigmentation itself that had changed. The demons must have corrupted the mana to the point where the sky has changed color. Similar to every place I had gone before, especially those where a significant amount of the mana, or in this case aura, in the air had been transformed into demonic energy, there were phenomena that would result in a shift in the surrounding environment. In this case, the color of the sky had changed. Ugh. A wailing voice from behind me startled me out of my thoughts. When I turned around, Hein was standing in the middle of the grass with his eyes closed and his legs extended widely in a horse stance position. From the looks of things, he was trying to get adjusted to the sudden shift in gravity but was having trouble with it. Ugh, what in the world? Another figure appeared behind Hein and they showed similar first-time reactions to his. As I got a better look, I could see that it was Ava, and she appeared to be having more difficulty adjusting to the gravity than Hein. But this was to be expected. After all, Hein's physique was much stronger. Not minding the two of them, I walked near them and waited for more people to show up. Soon, Leopold, Han Yufei and Liam showed up one by one. Leopold aside, Han Yufei and Liam were able to quickly adjust to the shift in gravity. From the way they were moving, it didn't seem as though they were affected in the slightest. Han Yufei because of his extremely sturdy body and Liam because he was Liam. There was no point in using common sense with him. It's only Angelica and Ryan left. They were the only two that were missing. Fortunately, the wait didn't last for long as the two of them appeared at the same time, with Angelica holding onto Ryan's hand. The faces of some of the people near us changed when the two of them appeared. I shook my head when I saw this. There was a very good reason why Ryan came with Angelica, despite the fact that he was no longer a child but a fully grown teen, and their appearance were therefore somewhat perplexing. Ugh. As soon as the two of them landed on the grass, Ryan's face distorted with pain as he almost fell on the floor right then and there. Had it not been for Angelica, he would most likely fallen hard on the ground with no way to stand up. And the reason why he couldn't come alone was because he was still, unfortunately, too weak for this place. Here, wear this. It was good that I knew this and came prepared as I handed Ryan a small bracelet. What's this? Ryan questioned as he took the bracelet. It's nothing much. I answered back while turning around to see how the others were faring. You can increase your strength with this simple artifact. You shouldn't have any trouble navigating this gravity with it. The only drawback is that it requires mana to activate, so utilize the potions I provided you before the trip, alright? Alright. Ryan obediently nodded his head and wore the bracelet. Satisfied with him, I focused my attention on the others. The reason why I didn't give him the bracelet before was because I wanted to see if he could adjust to the gravity or not. It was unfortunate that he couldn't. After seeing that they had all adjusted to gravity, I turned to Angelica and asked, "Which way should we go?" Without saying anything, Angelica closed her eyes for a brief moment before delicately raising her hand to point toward the west. That way. Nodding my head, I rushed the others to follow me. Alright, you heard her. Let's go. I raced my pace, leaving the others to follow after me at an increased pace. Ashton City, undisclosed location. It took a total of 10 minutes for everyone to finally enter the portal. By the time they all entered, Kevin felt his body grow tired. Despite his strength, keeping a portal for as long as he did still took a heavy toll on him. Staring in the direction of where the portal used to stand, Kevin mumbled, "Now that he's gone, I should be able to sort everything out without any problems." The air around him began to tremble as he reached out to the right. In contrast to the typical red glow that emanated from his arm, a white glow appeared in his palm. Then, out of nothing, a book began to take shape in his hands. The book was of a red color and was extremely familiar. Rin would instantly recognize it if he were present. It was the same book that had previously traveled with him and had assisted him in changing a number of crucial situations. It's almost time. Opening the book up, words started to form on the paper. Carefully reading through them, Kevin carefully closed the book in his hands after a while. Then, taking one last look at the area where the portal was set up, he directly left the area. From the sky, bits and pieces of red rained down. Spurt. Spurt. As the chunks fell to the ground, they splattered all over the ground, dyeing the grass red. "That's disgusting." While this was happening, Hein took a step back and disgustingly stared at the ground. He then turned to face Ava, who was standing next to him. "Couldn't you have, done this in a cleaner manner?" "I could've," Ava answered, extending her hand to the sky, allowing for multiple eagle-like creatures to land. Upon landing on her arm, she took out her flute and tapped the eagles on the head once. They instantly disappeared after that. "But I don't see the need to do this in a cleaner manner. Our priority right now is to get rid of anything that can give away our location." She sounded rather cold, but no one seemed to take offense to her tone. Ever since Small Snake died, one by one everyone changed. Not a single person apart from Liam and Han Yufei, who barely knew him, wasn't affected by his death. In a way, everyone became more serious and focused. The changes were great and they were nice to see. But at the same time, the cost that came with the changes wasn't something that I could have ever have hoped to afford. "I've been wondering, Rin." It was then that I heard Leopold's voice from beside me. Just like the others, he had also changed quite a bit. He no longer smoked. That was a real struggle for him to get past, but he was now a cigarette-free man. "What is it?" I asked while paying attention to my surroundings. "Your strength is about S+ rank, right?" "Yes." I quietly nodded while I extended my hand to push away one of the bushes in front of me. It wasn't something that I hid from the others. After all, I did spar with everyone in the group. Just as how they knew my strength, I knew theirs, and I was happy to say that apart from Ryan, everyone was above B rank. A praiseworthy result if I had to say so myself. "Liam's strength is also about the same as yours, right?" Leopold whispered while he quietly shifted his attention toward Liam, who was walking not so far from where we were. He had a rather lost and confused look on his face. "Yes." My speed slowed down a little. Wasn't sure where Leopold was getting at. "If I remember correctly, you also said that the strongest people on this planet were marquee rank." My feet came to a full stop. "So why in the world are we going around moving so quiet?" "Shoo." I put my finger on his mouth right before he could finish his sentence. The reason for this was because I spotted several demons in the distance. Everyone around me also stopped moving. "It looks like several Viscount-ranked demons," Hein whispered. Taking a closer look at the demons ahead, I relaxed and nodded my head. Hein is right, it's a couple of Viscount-ranked demons. Then, scanning the people around me, my eyes paused on Han Yufei and I ordered, "Take care of it." "Got it." His figure disappeared as soon as he said those words. After that, he appeared next to the two demons and crashed their heads against each other by pressing his hands against the back of their heads. In total, it only took about 10 seconds for Han Yufei to dispatch the two Viscount-ranked demons. I was deeply impressed by his performance. "Good job." "Thanks." We continued moving after that. Meanwhile, I recalled what I was previously talking about with Leopold. "Leopold, regarding your question." I turned to look at Leopold. "Although it is indeed true that I can probably wipe out this place with just Liam, you have to take into consideration that one wrong move can lead to our death." What worried me the most wasn't meeting a demon that turned out to be stronger than I anticipated. No, my worries lay with the fact that my actions could invoke Jezebeth's attention. Quite frankly, I was still far from his level. I'd be squashed like a bug if he met me at this moment. And in no way would I ever allow that to happen. I made a promise to myself that I was planning to keep. Ads by PubFuture. I'd never be satisfied without knowing that I failed to kill him after what he did. Never. Alright if you say so. Leopold dropped the conversation and followed the others deeper into the forest. Squinting my eyes, I gazed toward the far distance. Honestly, that wasn't the only reason why I didn't just go all out from the beginning. That was because I was planning on using my time here to finally break through to SS-rank. 1 week was equal to 70 days, and in spite of the low mana density around this place, I brought several things with me to aid my breakthrough. They cost a lot of money, but it was well worth the expenditure. Ever since my meeting with Malik al-Shaytan, I had made up my mind to do anything within my power to increase my strength. It wasn't about revenge or anything like that. What came foremost before that was my survival, and I knew that with my current abilities I couldn't guarantee my survival. I needed to keep improving. Although I'm not sure if this will work or not, it's better to give it a shot rather than doing nothing. Taking a step forward, I followed the others into the forest.